Hi everyone, welcome back to FKB Physio podcast. Today I am doing an episode about me and my story because it's the third birthday of FKB Physio, and as someone who is obsessed with podcasts, I find it so helpful to hear other people talking about their experiences, because if I've had a similar experience and I resonate with them, I feel really validated. So I figure, all right, this is self-involved, but it also might help someone else. Okay, so I became a physio not straight out of school. So when I was at school, I never would have occurred to me that I was going to be a physio, because to me, physiotherapy was what like the jock girls would do. And I was not a jock girl. I feel like I have really bad hand-eye coordination. I didn't really like sport. I wasn't good at sport. I'm academic, like I'm a nerd. So I felt like at school, there's not really much talk about like health sciences. There was PE and I was bad at PE. So I thought I was going to be a software engineer. So I actually went into engineering because I was told that getting into software engineering through an engineering degree was a better way to do it. And it didn't feel right. Like I didn't click at all with any of the subjects. And at that time, I actually got like super into the gym. So when I was at school, I did do sport. I did tennis. My dad was really into tennis and I played tennis consistently all through school, and dad would like drive me to my tennis games on the weekend, and me and dad would play tennis as well. I did random other sports like softball and volleyball and stuff, but I'm pretty sure I just picked them because they were fun and like not much effort and my friends were doing them. But at some point at school, mum and dad must have got me a gym membership, like maybe in year 10. I'm not sure how that came about, but like, thank you. That was at Ashgrove Body Designers, which is now Ashgrove Good Life. And as like the years went on at school, each year I sort of like must have gone to the gym a bit more often, and I do body attack and body combat and stuff. But yeah, I got really into the gym in first year uni and started going all the time. And I was also working at Coles in the deli wearing Dunlop volleys. And I remember I would like save up my breaks in my Coles deli shift. So I'd have like an hour lunch and two 15-minute breaks. I'd like save them all up into 1 hour and a half block and run to the gym. Like I worked at Ashgrove Coles and I would like run to Ashgrove Good Life with my volleys, do body attack and then run back. And unsurprisingly, I got shin pain from doing that. So I went to the physio and I like loved that experience. And I went along to a lecture of one of my friends who was studying human movements, and it was a biology lecture, and I was like, oh my god, that lecture is better than like any of the ones I've been to in my course. So after 6 months of engineering, I swapped into physio to start the next year. And at that time, I also became a body attack instructor, which the reason I did it was because I loved the music. And I remember sitting in the instructing thing and being like, I'm doing this because I love the body attack music. It's fun. It feels like dancing, and I want access to that music. That's sort of like how it all began. And as soon as I swapped into physio, I knew it was the right thing. It was like a whole different world, like coming from these like engineering lectures where there's like 400 people and it's very impersonal, to physio it's like quite small. The same people are in every course. You have to like strip down in your physio things so that people can like check out your anatomy and stuff like that. It was very different. I have to say, I did find it hard. I found the practical side hard. I am an introvert and I'm a perfectionist, and in my first year of physio I was still only 18, and I feel being kind of like a person who's very hard on yourself and believes at my heart that I'm like awkward and unapproachable and all these things. Doing exams where you have to like do a physical assessment on one of your classmates in an exam setting, I just found the whole thing very stressful. And I actually think a lot of it is like you're thinking so hard and you're so worried in your head that you come across as very tough. So I got a lot of feedback that I was like blunt, cold, unapproachable, unfriendly. I got told I couldn't form a rapport with patients, which again, like I think it's pretty tough when you're a student, like in an exam with a fake patient, you're trying to like form a rapport. You know, it's not really real life. I think probably, you know, I wasn't great. So yeah, it wasn't without its struggles, but we got there. So as soon as I graduated, I went straight into private practice. I knew that I didn't want to do like wards, hospital stuff. And I worked in Brisbane and then Melbourne. And I would say I don't really know, the first 2 or 3 years, like I couldn't tell you what I was doing. I shudder to think of it now, like 21 or 22, new grad, people were paying me money, and I just found the whole thing incredibly stressful. as I sort of started to get a bit more comfortable, I then was actually like using my brain a bit more and thinking a bit more about like, wait a minute, so like why are we doing the things we're doing? Like, for example, we were taught at uni that doing manipulations, which is what chiropractors do, like cracking of joints, that was like not good and not evidence-based. But what we were doing, which was literally the exact same thing but a smaller velocity, called immobilization, that was fine. Another thing that I couldn't understand was that we were taught massage in one subject at uni. So if you imagine that you did a 4-year course, 8 subjects a year, 32 subjects, one of them was on massage, and in exams, we weren't allowed to use massage as a treatment modality. And yet, when you come in and practice, every single patient is expecting a massage. People would come in and ask for a sports massage, and I just remember thinking like, but that's not my job. And I felt like people would pick to see me as a physio based on how good my massaging skills were. And I'm like, but that's not my job. Like, that's not what I studied. That's not what I think this is about. And there's no shade at all on massage therapists. Massage therapists, that's literally their job. And that's so fine. Someone goes to a massage therapist for a massage. But I was a physio. It just didn't feel right. I also noticed that like we were quite good at getting people to feel less pain early on, but we weren't great at what came next. So someone would like sprain their ankle and we'd be able to kind of calm that down in the early stages, but then they'd want to get back to sport, and the types of things we were doing sort of weren't hard enough to prepare them for that activity. I remember specifically having a patient who every time she like would get back into the gym, she'd do some burpees and she'd hurt her lower back. And I'd, do my thing, I'd massage her back and tape it up and give her some like generic little things, and after 2 weeks her back would feel better. And then we'd do some Pilates stuff, and this is no shade on Pilates, I'm literally talking about the type of Pilates and the way I was taught, which isn't related to doing burpees, like doing an exercise lying down on a reformer, bracing your core, doing ab stabilization stuff. How's that going to help you get back to burpees safely? Like, I could see that disconnect, and obviously she would keep hurting her back doing burpees, and I sort of just was like, I don't see how this is helping her to get to that. But there was not enough time to really get into it because we had 20-minute appointments. And in the physio circles I was working in, and social media like wasn't big back then still, there was no discussion around this sort of thing. The discussion was pretty much about like, how often are you getting the patients back in? And this is no shade on the clinic I was working at either. This is just how I think it is in a lot of the places. And so that kind of disconnect, combined with just absolute hectic nature of 20-minute back-to-back appointments, I got so burnt out, I was just like, I've picked the wrong profession. Like, I'm too introverted, I'm too whatever, this is the wrong job for me. So I decided to move to the UK for a working holiday. So in the UK, all physiotherapy is covered by the NHS, which means that people don't have to pay out of pocket. And take the financial pressure out of the job and look at how things change. The way physios practice over there, in the NHS at least, was completely different, and it was interesting that it wasn't about getting them back in or whatever anymore. It was about what actually do they need to get better, and sometimes like what's the minimum they need to get better. And the other thing was I worked in this chronic pain team, which was really interesting. I'd honestly never met a patient like the ones I met in that chronic pain management team. And what was really interesting to me was that there were these people that were like in this spiral of kind of pain and lack of function that had been going for years. And often when we saw these people, they would have had physiotherapy for a year or two, and we would kind of consider that they hadn't actually started any sort of real therapy if they just had kind of traditional physiotherapy management, like massage and light stretches and all these sort of things, because the way you manage a more persistent pain problem is so different. And the approach there made sense to me. Like, in the way that the other kind of style of physio didn't make any sense to me at all, this did, because it was trying to find out like a baseline of where these people were at and what they could tolerate, and gradually building it up from there. And that is logical to me, and it made sense. And I guess the NHS sort of referred to it as more of like a hands-off kind of approach, which a lot of people don't like. But I think, again, it's that misinterpretation of the word hands-off. Like, hands-off doesn't mean you don't put hands on a patient. It means that the treatment isn't primarily hands-on. You still do a hands-on assessment. You still do a joint assessment, you still do a movement assessment, you still perform a thorough assessment on somebody, but you don't perform like heaps of hands-on treatment as the main therapy. So I just found that was a really eye-opening experience for me, and it really helped begin my return to liking being a physio. So then my visa ran out, I moved to the Middle East in Kuwait. I basically did that because I heard about the opportunity from someone I worked with in London. She taught Body Attack, and she was a Kuwaiti woman, and she kind of alerted me to this opportunity to work for a gym in Kuwait where the owner was a guy from New Zealand. So I was like, okay, yeah, that sounds good. I didn't want to go home. I wanted to keep traveling and having a fun time. Plus, it was this opportunity to be the only physio, and I knew I kind of wanted to have my own thing at one point. So in that job, I worked in a gym purely with personal trainers, and that was actually really interesting. And I remember kind of looking at the exercises I would do myself, which were becoming more and more sort of strength gym based, and look at the exercise I gave to my clients, which were like these random like activation exercises or like light exercises with a TheraBand. And I'd often kind of say like, oh yeah, I'm like pretty strong, but I'm not really strong at like physio exercises. And that like disconnect, eventually I sort of thought, well, why am I giving my clients different exercises to what I would do in the gym myself? And if I can tell that I'm objectively quite strong, but I'm weak at these random isolated exercises that I apparently have deemed as important from my physio career, am I really weak, or are those exercises just kind of like awkward and pointless? And it just, again, the logic of why would you need to do these tiny little exercises in order to get stronger at this other thing, like it just didn't really make sense. And it was probably around that time when I found all of Adam Meakin's blogs. And it was also because like, as I moved more towards like giving exercises rehab, a lot of the personal trainers at the gym were kind of like expecting me to give trigger point massage and stuff like that. And again, I think it's kind of funny because like heaps of personal trainers are trained in trigger point massage. So I'm like, well, if that's my job and that's also your job, like what am I here for? And I think one of them had done dry needling qualification, and it's like physios kind of take ownership over like Pilates and dry needling and stuff. And it's like, yeah, like heaps of other professions actually do those things too. So if that's what physios do, then how are we any different to anyone else, you know? And I guess like with exercise, like again, I suppose I struggled a little bit kind of going, oh, well, I am just giving exercise, like, is it any different to being a personal trainer? And in a lot of ways it's not, and I don't care about that. But Adam's blogs were really helpful. He had basically had all the same problems and discoveries and everything that I have, but he'd had them like years earlier, and I feel like he's a lot sort of more smart than me, and he'd written all these blogs and used a lot of like research to kind of back up his points and indicate why he sort of thought so much of the way physio is traditionally done like didn't make any sense, which was really cool. Then I did a personal training course in Kuwait, and I was working on the gym floor with PTs all the time. My exercise prescription skills got a lot better, and I did learn that a lot from working with PTs, and I started using a personal trainer myself, which, you know, I've been going to the gym consistently since I was a teenager. But at like 29, for the first time, I started using a PT, and well, he was actually an exercise scientist. And again, like, he knows way more than me about exercise because he's an exercise scientist. And even though I've been going to the gym for ages and I was a physio, I didn't know anywhere near as much about exercise prescription as he did, even though I thought in my 20s, I thought I definitely did, but I didn't. And that whole experience of kind of learning a lot from these personal trainers and realizing how much more to exercise prescription there was really helpful. And I feel like programming is a big thing that physios probably traditionally don't know that much about, and I learned a lot about that, and I just got super comfortable working on the gym floor. And I guess the other thing is that I felt much more comfortable giving people harder stuff to do, and I felt like I was getting much more equipped at getting people back to what they could do before they got injured, because I was actually like challenging them and giving them harder stuff. Just cycling back to the whole like, I'm a perfectionist introvert and I find being a physio hard thing. Thank God it got much easier as I got older. It took forever. I feel super comfortable these days in my mid-30s, but it's been a journey to get here. I guess what I realized at some point is like, I care heaps about everything, right? But that includes other people. So if you come in with a problem, like, I care heaps about it. I care because I care and I want the person to get better, but I also care because like I want to make sure that I've done a good job. And like caring a lot and caring a lot about other people, turns out I actually think that's like a really good quality to have as a physio. So sure, I'm not the most like socially competent person, although again, there's skills you can develop, and luckily I have developed them much better now, but I felt like I had personality traits that meant I wasn't suited to being a physio, but I came to realize that people don't really care if you're a bit awkward and a bit odd if you're invested in them. And I found actually I could form these like really close relationships with my clients, not inappropriate ones, just, you know, close. And then being that comfortable around them meant that I could do my job way better, and it meant that we were way more comfortable around each other, and it actually just made me in turn relax heaps more. And I think the other thing was that I realized that you don't have to be perfect. I am absolutely still working on that, but some things that really stand out to me was like as a gym instructor, I decided I was just bad at gym instructing. And when I moved to England, I actually like didn't teach body attack when I first moved over because I decided I was like too bad at it. I went to all these classes in London and I was like, well, I may not be very good at this, but I am not as bad as some of these other people. And seeing that other people who I thought weren't very good at it were doing it and it was fine and people still went to their classes, it was just like a game changer for me. And I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to be the best, but I'm good enough. So slowly, it became more comfortable. So if you are an introvert perfectionist out there who is in a person-facing job and you think that it's not for you, but you're like still in your early 20s, hang in there. Gets easier. Okay, so final little part of the story is how did I start my own business when I came home? So I moved home from Kuwait because of COVID. It was like the day it got declared as a thing, they were going to close the airport, and I just had a bad feeling. So I was like, oh, I'll just like go home and wait it out. And went home to like live with my parents, thinking it was for 2 weeks. And after a few months, I just thought, oh, well, you know what? I'm just going to like hire a room in this local gym and see how we go. And also decided to start my Masters of Sports Medicine. So I decided to do that as well. June or July 2020, I started off doing like exercise classes for my parents because I've always thought like mum and dad need to get into like lifting weights in the gym. Mum brought some of her friends, and now I'm doing almost 20, like the business is doing almost 20 bone density classes a week, which is pretty cool. And these classes, like, they're so fulfilling to me because they make sense. Like, lifting weights and building strength is good for you. It's kind of like, you can't argue that it isn't, right? So I know with certainty that it is a good thing to be doing. So that's great. It's fun. People can do amazing things they never thought they'd be able to. And it's just like this really fun, rewarding thing, a part of my job I love so much. And you get to see people through everything. Like, you see them before they need a surgery, then you see them in the journey up to a surgery they now need, and then you see them after that surgery. And this continuity of care, I think, is super important and often missing. So I get to have this like quite close relationship with them, and we know their medical history, we know like stuff they've battled with in the past, and I can see as the years go on that really kind of knowing the patient so well, I can just see how beneficial that is, especially for people like aging population. I definitely still see physio clients. The type of clients I tend to attract are people that have tried heaps of other things and it hasn't worked, which is great. Like, that's the exact sort of client I want, because I have heaps of time for my appointments. And I think like new grad me and like new grad physios out there, like if you're working at like a really busy clinic that has like 30-minute appointments, honestly, like you don't really want someone to come in with this like 12-year history of this complex chronic thing. Whereas I do want those clients, and I actually don't want you just like, oh, I've got a bit of a stiff neck, like just go down to the physio and get a bit of a treatment on it. Like I don't want those clients, but there are heaps of physios that do. So I think it's like a little niche that I have that probably serves me and other physios well, because we're both like having the type of work that we prefer doing. Because I work for myself and it's not like crazy busy, I have heaps of time to like really delve into things with people. If I think they need more than an hour and I can use it, I'll use it, and I don't mind. So I just sort of like the problem solving element of kind of figuring out like what are the components this person might need to get them back to doing what they were doing before. And I do think of it as like a patient-centered approach as opposed to fixing an injury. So the way I would explain that is, a lot of the time people go, oh, my knee started hurting, and there'll be this really good reason why, like they took up running and they haven't run in 10 years or something like that. But they go, oh, my knee started hurting, so I went to the doctor and I got a scan and it shows I have a meniscus tear. So now I need to get surgery. And once I've had surgery, I'll come and start rehabbing with you. Whereas I sort of think, okay, you started running when you haven't done it in 10 years. So your knee started hurting, which makes complete sense. Then you went and got a scan which showed a meniscus tear that could have been there before. So you don't actually know the meniscus tear is why your knee is hurting now. So there's a very good chance that a rehab approach that might work is just to like calm the knee down and then slowly build it up and then try to get into running again more progressively. But a lot of people sort of go, oh, well, but I've got a meniscus tear, so I need to fix the tear and then I can rehab. And in the time when they're going through the process of like seeing the doctor, getting the scan, waiting for the surgery, they're not doing anything, but they could actually have been rehabbing that whole time. And often in those waiting periods, people really decline, especially if they're a bit older or they've had other injuries, and then they don't really bounce back that well from the surgery. And then something else starts hurting, and it's this whole thing, and it's sort of like there's always this focus on like, I need to fix this meniscus tear, or I need to fix this, whatever the thing is, and then I'll be better. And I know it sounds like that's how it should work, but bodies just kind of don't work that way a lot of the time. And a lot of the time, things that appear broken inside don't hurt, or you can get them to a point where they don't hurt and you can do what you want anyway. And on the kind of other side of that, often fixing things, they still hurt after. And so the focus should be getting to doing the things you want to do. And that path might involve surgery, but the goal still has to be sitting there of I need to get back to this. And so like, let's follow the path to get back to that. As soon as the path is more, I need to fix this thing, it becomes murky. There are definitely times when fixing the thing does need to happen. I would say a really good example of it is like joint replacement surgery. So basically, that's how FKB Physio came to be. And I have to say, like, yeah, I love my job and my lifestyle. Like, it's busy, and I find it pretty hard a lot of the time, to be honest. I find it hard living it, but then I tell myself it's like not hard at all. So probably another thing I could do with working on, but I never dread coming to work. So this is a happy third birthday to my business, and hopefully many more to come. Thank you so much for listening or watching and for supporting me in whatever way you have until this point.